This sort of balance doesn't give as high quality measurements as an analytical balance, but it's got a couple of uses. It has this nice open air pan that makes it easy to get your substances in and out. You can handle larger glassware, and it tends to have a higher mass range. This one, in fact, will go up to 200 grams, and it'll still give you the 0.001 gram, in other words, a single milligram measurement. Now, that said, we have the same issue as we have with our big analytical balances, which is we've got to make sure the thing is level. Let me try to get the lighting right. Now you see here we have another one of these bubble levels, and this balance is definitely not level. That might be one of the reasons we see all these mass fluctuations on that balance. Part of that's also that it's an open air pan, so as I'm moving around and as the air currents in the room are present, they're going to be blowing on the pan and throwing the mass off by a little bit. But it'll be in the least significant figure being displayed by the balance, so we already expect that's not going to be a high quality measurement. Now you can see down here is where we find our feet for actually adjusting this particular balance right off to the side. So if we do the same sort of tricks where we rotate things, we can go ahead and get them nicely centered. We can try to walk it across until it's nice and level. You can also, with these, lift up on them a little bit on one side with your hand, just to get a rough feel for how high it's going to have to be before it ends up being centered. You can see right now this balance is pretty far off. I'm having to really screw that one around a lot. So maybe try to do this side a little bit. In fact, that makes more sense. So I'll drop this side down. Oops. And with a lot of back and forth, I could eventually get that centered up. It's a fairly boring piece of video to watch, so I'll just leave it at that. You'll just go ahead and you'll adjust the 2 feet. With this kind of a balance, it's so lightweight, it's really helpful to have 2 hands for it, because the moment you start to try to twist it, you'll see it just start sliding across the room since I'm using 1 hand. So this is definitely a 2-handed job. You don't necessarily have to be gloved up for this. You won't be messing up anything with your hand oils since the balance is over here at the center. Now, one thing I want to mention generically, and I forgot to say this in the analytical balance video, you want to make sure that when you go to clean things off, you use an appropriate cleaning brush. Most brushes are not for that purpose, and we shouldn't be using paper towels either, because they can end up leaving a static charge behind. What you want to use is a brush meant for it. Now, believe it or not, it's got a small amount of radioactive doping on it. Don't worry, nothing that's going to hurt you. In fact, the first layer of your dead skin cells is enough to stop the penetration of it, and it's very slow in its emission anyway. But what you do when you brush it across it, it ends up taking any of the static charge off, and so you don't have to worry about buildup of static electricity. The reason for that, and this is true on both of our balances, if you take off the tray, underneath it there's actually a piezoelectric element where when you press down on a ceramic, it's converting pressure into electricity. And you can also use it in reverse by putting electricity on it, making pressure oscillations, and that's also known as a sound. So the piezo buzzer inside of your computer that goes bzzz or bah whenever you turn it on, or whenever there's a power outage, those are typically piezo buzzers. This is the same principle, just working the opposite direction. Thing is, if you're putting a static charge onto something that converts pressure to electricity, and you're reading the electricity and converting that into a mass unit, obviously you've just thrown off your mass pretty substantially. So make sure that you use the appropriate hardware to clean your balances.